Now, a quick disclaimer before we start. I'm not saying that John, Paul or George knew that they were using modes in their writing. I'm sure they probably didn't even know what modes were. Like most writers, the Beatles just wrote what they thought sounded good. But by looking at how modes have been used in Beatles songs, we can understand what modes are for, how they can make a song sound the way it does, and then we can not only identify that in other music, but we can use those same modes in our own music. So let's begin with Tomorrow Never Knows. Tomorrow Never Knows starts with a static drone of C. Now at this point at the beginning of the song we haven't got any indication of whether this is a major key or a minor key. All we've got is a C droning through. Now this drone continues throughout the whole song, constantly underpinning all of the harmony. But when John's vocal enters on a repeating E note here, we now get placed into C major, because we've got C as our root thanks to the drone, and this E has now entered from the vocal, and C and E together form a major third, which is giving us a C major sound.
Turn off your mind, relax and float downstream.
Now we stay here in C major for the next 5 bars, but then we get a note that isn't diatonic to C major, one that doesn't belong there, which is B flat.
It is not dying. It is not dying.
When John sings this B flat note, it places us in C mixolydian instead. Mixolydian is the same as the major scale, however the 7th note has been flattened. So in the case of C major, that B has become a B flat. Mixolydian has a far less functional sound than major. In a major scale, everything wants to draw back towards the root. Everything wants to resolve. But in Mixolydian, we're far more happy to just sit anywhere in the scale without any sense of being pulled back home. Now this is because in a major scale, the 7th degree, called the leading tone, leads us back up to the root because it's only a semitone away. So when you're on the 7th degree, there's a lot of tension and it's resolved when you get back to the 8th degree or the tonic. However, in Mixolydian, we've flattened this leading tone, which slightly nullifies its effect. It makes it less tense to sit there. The use of the Mixolydian mode in this song is one of the things that is helping create this hypnotic transcendental atmosphere. Now, speaking of hypnotic transcendental Beatles songs, that takes me on to my second example, Within You Without You. Within You Without You is also in the Mixolydian mode, this time in the C sharp Mixolydian mode. And just like in Tomorrow Never Knows, we also begin with this drone at the beginning, which establishes the key center. However, in this example, we quickly get this violin line that establishes us in C sharp Mixolydian with these flat 7s and these major thirds. Now, Within You Without You is even more harmonically sparse than Tomorrow Never Knows. If Tomorrow Never Knows only used 2 chords, well, Within You Without You only uses 1 chord. This means all of the harmonic development is drawn from where the melody goes. The melody moves around the scale, taking us to different places within the Mixolydian mode. Now, because this song only has that one C sharp 5 chord throughout the entire song, any sense of tonality or harmony, any sense of major or minor or modal, all comes from what notes the melody plays. So by changing those notes subtly, we can hear what this song would sound like in different ways. So this is what it would sound like if Within You Without You was in a major key. So it's amazing how just a couple notes changed, or sometimes just one note changed, can completely change the context in which we hear all of the other notes. It sets down whether it's a major key or a minor key, and that becomes the context in which we hear the rest of the song. Now my third example is also Mixolydian. It's She Said, She Said. Now as B flat is the first chord, our ears take it that B flat is the root, so we're in B flat, but B flat 7 has an A flat in it, which is the flattened 7th in B flat, so we're not just purely in B flat major, there's definitely something else going on there. And yes, we could be in Mixolydian at this point, and it does turn out that we are in Mixolydian, but with this one chord at the beginning, this dominant 7th chord, we could actually be in a few places, particularly in a blues scale. So it's quite common on a blues song to begin with the dominant 7th version of the root chords. So it's not always clean cut at any point in the song which mode or which scale you're in. It can sometimes be ambiguous, like here at this one point. But then when the verse kicks in, we get a lot more notes and a lot more context very quickly, and we get this A flat chord with an A flat at the bottom. So that really hits home that we are actually in B flat Mixolydian. Now, in the first two examples we looked in Tomorrow Never Knows and Within You Without You, the harmony sat still with a drone, whilst the melody explored the Mixolydian scale. However, in She Said, She Said, it's the other way around. The vocal melody rarely touches on the Mixolydian notes and stays largely in the major scale. We do at the end of the verse though get the A flat appearing in the vocal melody as well. But because for most of the verse the A flat just stays in the harmony and not in the main melody, it's just like a hint of Mixolydian, unlike in Within You Without You or Tomorrow Never Knows, where Mixolydian was the main and primary flavour. Now my next example is Hey Jude. Hey Jude begins in F major for the majority of the song, but then when we hit the outro, that coda section, we now go into F Mixolydian. So it's this E flat chord here, the flattened 7th chord in F major, that gives us the Mixolydian sound, because in F major we should have an E natural, but here we've got an E flat. Now when I talked about this in my previous Beatles modes video, a lot of people actually said in the comments that they thought that the outro of Hey Jude was in B flat major, not F Mixolydian. And there is reason for this, good reason for this, which is that both of those scales, B flat major and F Mixolydian, use the exact same notes. They are the same notes, but in a different order. And that is ultimately how modes work. They are a major scale, but rewritten from a different degree. So if you take the B flat major scale and rewrite it starting on F, you've got F Mixolydian. So that's where they're coming from that. But what makes the difference between something being in a mode like F Mixolydian or in the major scale that it comes from, like B flat major, is all about where the root is. Which is the root, B flat or F? And I'm pretty certain in Hey Jude here, it is F, and I can show you why I think that. So here is the outro section from Hey Jude. And what I've done is I've extended the B flat chord that happens over where the F chord normally would be. And if B flat really was the root, at this point in the song, it would sound resolved. It would sound like it'd come home. But as you can hear from that, it doesn't sound like it's resolved. It sounds like it's still tense. It still needs to resolve somewhere. And it resolves when it gets to this F chord. So because it's resolving on the F chord, because when we hit the F chord, there's nowhere left to go, we're completely resolved and static, that is saying that F is the root. So even though it uses the same notes as B flat major, we are in F Mixolydian because F is the root. Now if we look a bit more closely at this outro of Hey Jude, you can see that the melody actually only uses the major scale, it only uses notes from F major. It's only the chords below which are giving it that Mixolydian sound, so it's a bit like the previous example in She Said, She Said, where it's the chords which are giving it the Mixolydian sound. And because the whole song before it has been in F major, when we get this Mixolydian sound in the outro, it suddenly opens it up and gives this new layer of excitement, which is perfect when we're about to enter an incredibly long outro. Now you can really hear the difference that this Mixolydian chord, this E flat chord, is making to the outro if I replace it with a chord that would be more typical of the major scale. So in the major scale, it still sounds good, it still sounds harmonically pleasing, but it's not as exciting as the E flat chord was. Now, as you may have noticed so far, the vast majority of modal writing in the Beatles is Mixolydian. But one song from the Beatles catalogue that doesn't use Mixolydian and uses a different mode is Eleanor Rigby. Eleanor Rigby is in E Dorian.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Lives in the dream.
Now in Eleanor Rigby, all of the chords are staying firmly in E minor or E Aeolian. So we've got this E minor and the C major chord, so there's nothing unusual going on there. But in the melody that Paul sings over the E minor chord, we get the C sharp instead of C natural. So that C sharp is the raised version, the sharpened version of the 6th note of the minor scale, which gives us a Dorian scale. This Dorian note adds some more interest over the static E minor chord by taking us into a different harmonic landscape. And it also provides a lot more juxtaposition when we then hit the C natural chord. It makes the C natural chord sound a lot more dramatic compared to the lighter sounding C sharp that we've grown used to over the last couple bars. To really hear the difference that this C sharp is making, let me take it out and you can hear what Eleanor Rigby would sound like if it was purely in the minor scale. To me, this minor scale version of Eleanor Rigby sounds a lot more serious and less whimsical. That C sharp is definitely adding a lot to the flavour of the song. Now my final example today is once again in Mixolydian. It's Norwegian Wood.
I once had a girl, or should I say, she once had me.
Norwegian Wood is in E Mixolydian. Most of the melody, however, is actually plainly just E major, just in the E major scale. It's only this little turnaround at the end of the melody that involves a D natural. And D natural is the flattened version of the 7th note in E major, so that's giving us the Mixolydian sound. John's vocal hits this D natural, and the chord below, B minor, supports it by having a D natural in the chord. This little Mixolydian moment at the end of each phrase lends the song its folky, whimsical charm. So once again, let me remove that Mixolydian note so you can hear what Norwegian Wood would sound like if it was in a simple E major. So for me, that makes a big impact on the way that this tune comes across. It suddenly sounds a lot more like a nursery rhyme or something, a lot more predictable and functional. With the flattened 7th, it's a lot more interesting and exotic. It's amazing how just changing one note in the melody can recontextualize the entire phrase. So there you go, 6 examples of modal writing within Beatles songs. And thank you to everyone who contributed towards this video, particularly this guy called Jongtra, I think I'm saying that right, from Reddit, who actually was the one who suggested to me Tomorrow Never Knows, Within You, Without You, and She Said, She Said. If you can think of any other Beatles songs that use modes within them, please put them in the comments below and maybe I'll do another video about this.
They're rather special scales, and I wouldn't have dreamed of bothering you with them except for an incident that happened a few months ago. My 14-year-old daughter, Jamie, happened to ask me one day why a certain Beatles song had such funny harmony. She couldn't seem to find the right chords for it on her guitar. And I began to explain to her that the song was modal. That is, it was based on what is called a mode. You hear that lowered 7th? That's what gives it its charm, and that's what makes it Mixolydian.